He hadn't planned to come back that day. Success had kept him away long enough to believe everything at home was fine. But when Daniel Reed stepped into the back hallway of a luxury office building and saw a woman on her knees scrubbing a toilet with bare hands, something in his chest stopped cold. Because that woman wasn't just any worker. It was his mother, the same woman he had been sending money to for years, and the look on her face wasn't just exhaustion, it was fear. Fear of being seen, fear of being recognized, and fear of something she had spent decades hiding. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It started long before that moment, before the uniform, before the silence, before the lie. Daniel hadn't told anyone he was coming back to Pennsylvania. Not his colleagues, not his friends, not even his mother. He had imagined it differently. A quiet knock on her door, her surprised smile, maybe tears, maybe laughter. He had spent years building a life that felt solid, sending money home every month without fail, convinced that he was taking care of the one person who had never failed him. The building he walked into that afternoon wasn't the kind of place his mother should have been anywhere near. Polished marble floors, glass walls, security desks staffed with men in tailored suits. It smelled like expensive coffee and new money. Daniel had only come in to meet a client on the third floor. It was supposed to be routine. He remembered taking a wrong turn. A service corridor instead of the main hallway, the lighting dimmer, the air colder, the sound of a cart rolling somewhere ahead. He almost turned back, but then he heard the scraping sound. Slow, repetitive. Like something being dragged across porcelain. He followed it without thinking, and then he saw her. Martha Reed was on her knees in front of a toilet stall. Sleeves rolled up past her elbows, a stained rag in her hand. A plastic bucket sat beside her, the water inside already gray. Her hair, once always neat, was tied back loosely, strands falling around her face. She didn't look up at first. She just kept scrubbing, as if the motion itself was the only thing holding her together. For a second, Daniel didn't recognize her. Not because her face had changed, but because nothing about this scene made sense. "Mom?" The word came out before he could stop it. Martha froze, the rag stopped moving. Her shoulders stiffened. For a long moment she didn't turn around. It was as if she had heard something she wasn't supposed to hear, something that didn't belong in this place. Then slowly, too slowly, she looked over her shoulder, and when their eyes met, the color drained from her face. "Daniel?" Her voice was barely a whisper. He took a step forward, his mind scrambling to catch up with what he was seeing. What are you doing here?" It was a stupid question. He could see exactly what she was doing, but it was the only thing he could say. Martha stood up too quickly, knocking the bucket slightly so the water sloshed against the rim. She wiped her hands on her uniform, as if that could erase what he had already seen. "You shouldn't be here," she said, not angry, not surprised, just urgent. Daniel stared at her. "I came to see you. I thought you were home." "I am home," she said quickly. "I mean, this is just temporary. It's nothing." "Nothing?" His voice cracked before he could control it. "You're cleaning toilets, with your bare hands." She flinched at that. For a moment neither of them spoke. The hum of the building filled the silence. Somewhere far away, a door opened and closed. But in that narrow hallway, it felt like the world had stopped. "I've been sending you money," Daniel said finally, quieter now, every month, for years. Martha's eyes dropped to the floor. "I know. Then why are you here?" She shook her head almost immediately. "It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." "I can't." The answer came too fast. Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, something heavier. "You can't?" he repeated. Martha stepped toward him, lowering her voice. "Daniel, please, not here. You need to leave." "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not until you explain why you're working here like this." "It's just a job," she insisted. But her hands were trembling now. "People work. That's not a crime. Not when their son is sending them more than enough to live on." That hit. She looked up at him again, and this time there was something else in her eyes. Not just fear, guilt. But it wasn't the kind of guilt he expected. "Daniel," she said softly, almost pleading now. "You don't understand how things work here, then help me understand." Another pause. Longer this time. Martha glanced down the hallway, then back at him, as if checking whether anyone else was watching. Her voice dropped even lower. There are things you don't know, she said. Then tell me. I can't, the same answer. But now it carried weight. Daniel took another step closer. Is someone making you do this? No. Then why are you scared? That question landed harder than the others. Martha didn't answer right away. Her lips parted slightly, like she might say something, like she might finally explain everything. But instead, she shook her head again. You need to go, she said, please, before someone sees you. Sees me? Daniel frowned. Why would that matter? Martha's eyes flicked toward the far end of the corridor again. Her breathing had changed now, shallow, uneven. And suddenly, Daniel realized something that made his stomach drop. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of who might see them together. Mom, he said slowly. What aren't you telling me? She didn't answer. She just took a small step back, as if putting distance between them could undo what had already happened. And in that moment, Daniel understood one thing with absolute certainty. This wasn't about money. This wasn't about work. Whatever his mother was hiding, it was big enough to make her pretend she didn't even want her own son to find her. And that scared him more than anything else. Daniel didn't move. For a long second, he just stood there, staring at his mother as if the scene might shift if he blinked hard enough. As if the woman in the faded uniform might disappear and be replaced by the version of her he had carried in his mind for years, safe, comfortable, taken care of. But she didn't disappear. She picked up the rag again, not to clean, just to have something in her hands. I said you need to go, Martha repeated, quieter now, her eyes fixed somewhere past his shoulder. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, not this time. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't get to shut me out like this. Not after everything. Martha's jaw tightened. Everything? She echoed. You mean the money? That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean, Daniel? Her voice rose just slightly, enough to crack through the controlled calm she had been holding on to. Because from where I stand, that's what this looks like. You come back, you see me working, and suddenly something's wrong. Something is wrong, he said. You're working here. You're hiding it. You're acting like you're afraid someone's going to catch you talking to me. She didn't deny it. That was the part that made his stomach turn. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, trying to slow his thoughts down, but they kept racing ahead of him. Is this about money? He asked. Did something happen? Did someone take it? Are you in debt? No. The answer came too quickly again. Then where did it go? I told you, she said, sharper now. It's not what you think. Then give me something I can understand. Martha exhaled slowly, her shoulders rising and falling. For a moment, Daniel thought she might finally break, that whatever she had been holding back would spill out right there in that narrow hallway. Instead, she stepped past him. Walk with me, she said. He hesitated, then followed. They moved down the service corridor together, past closed doors and dim overhead lights. Martha pushed a cart in front of her, the wheels squeaking faintly with every turn. She didn't look at him as they walked, and he didn't push her. Not yet. They reached a small break room tucked behind a heavy metal door. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly, casting everything in a pale, flat glow. A folding table sat in the corner with a stack of paper cups and a coffee machine that looked older than the building itself. Martha closed the door behind them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she turned to face him. You shouldn't have come here, she said again. But this time there was something else in her voice. Not just urgency. Not just fear, regret. Daniel leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. I didn't know I needed permission to see my own mother. That's not what I meant. Then say what you mean. She looked at him, really looked this time, and something in her expression shifted. He saw it, the same look she used to give him when he was younger, when she was trying to decide how much truth he could handle. Only now it wasn't about protecting him from something small, it was something bigger. You've built a good life, she said quietly. You've worked hard for it. I didn't want to drag you back into things that don't belong to you anymore. Daniel frowned. Don't belong to me. Martha hesitated. Then she shook her head. Forget I said that. No, he said immediately. You don't get to do that, not anymore. She looked away, pressing her lips together. Daniel pushed off the wall and stepped closer. Mom, whatever this is, I'm already in it. You think seeing you like that didn't pull me in? You think I can just walk away now? Her eyes closed for a second. I was trying to protect you. From what? She opened her eyes again, and for a brief moment he saw something raw there. Not just fear this time, not just guilt. Something heavier, from the past, she said. Daniel let out a breath that felt too tight in his chest. What past? Martha didn't answer right away. She walked over to the table, picking up a paper cup just to set it down again. Her hands needed something to do. There are people connected to this place, she said slowly. People who don't like things being uncovered. Daniel's pulse ticked up. Uncovered? She nodded once. And you're working here because of them? I'm working here because I have to, she said. Because it keeps certain doors closed. That doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to, she said, her voice tightening. That's the point. Daniel stared at her. You're telling me you chose to scrub toilets in a building like this just to keep doors closed, yes? The word landed hard. He searched her face, looking for any sign that she was exaggerating, deflecting anything, but there was none, just a quiet, steady certainty. Then open one, he said. Just one. For me. Martha's gaze dropped to the floor. You don't understand what that would do, she whispered. Then help me understand. Silence stretched between them again. This time, it didn't feel like hesitation. It felt like a wall. Daniel felt something inside him shift again, sharper now. Is this about the money, he asked, because I checked the transfers. They went through. Every single one. Martha's head snapped up. You checked? Of course I checked, he said. You think I wouldn't? She took a step back, and for the first time since he had seen her, she looked shaken in a different way. Not afraid of being seen, afraid of what he might find. Daniel, she started, but he was already pulling out his phone. I called the bank on my way here, he said. Asked them to walk me through the accounts. You know what they told me? Martha didn't answer. They told me the money didn't just sit there. It was withdrawn, regularly. Her face went still. Not by you, he added, a long pause, the kind that stretches just enough to confirm what no one wants to say out loud. Daniel lowered his voice. So I'll ask you again, where did it go? Martha didn't speak. She just looked at him, and this time the fear in her eyes had changed. It wasn't just fear of someone else anymore. It was fear of the truth finally catching up. Then, almost under her breath, she said, There are names you don't recognize yet. Daniel felt his chest tighten, then start with one. Martha hesitated. For a moment it looked like she might refuse again, but then slowly she turned toward a small metal locker against the wall. She opened it, reached inside, and pulled out a thin, folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled as she held it. I shouldn't even have this, she whispered. Daniel stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the paper. What is it? Martha looked at him one last time, then she unfolded it, and for the first time Daniel saw it clearly. A typed header, an address, and a name he had never heard before, Lila Bennett. Daniel didn't reach for the paper right away. He just stared at the name, Lila Bennett. It meant nothing to him, and yet something about it felt heavy, like it carried a weight he couldn't see yet. The letters were typed cleanly at the top of the document, followed by a Westchester address and a date from over 30 years ago. Who is that? He asked. Martha folded the paper slightly, as if even holding it open too long was dangerous. Someone you shouldn't be asking about. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. Daniel exhaled sharply, then reached out and took the paper from her before she could pull it back. She didn't fight him, but her fingers lingered for a second too long before letting go. He scanned it quickly. The document wasn't just a name and an address. There were notes typed below, short clipped lines that didn't read like a letter, more like a record. Maintenance log entries, dates, times, references to rooms being locked, files being moved, access being restricted. And then, near the bottom, something handwritten, a different ink, a different hand, do not release without confirmation. Daniel frowned. Confirmation of what? Martha didn't answer. He looked up at her. This isn't just some random person, is it? No. Then what is it? She rubbed her forehead, closing her eyes for a moment. It's something that was never supposed to leave that building. Daniel glanced back at the paper. This building? She nodded once. A slow realization started to form in his mind. You didn't just start working here, did you? No. How long? Another pause. Long enough, she said. That's not good enough. It's all you're getting. Daniel clenched his jaw. The tension between them had shifted now. It wasn't just confusion anymore. It was resistance. She wasn't just avoiding the truth, she was guarding it, and that meant it mattered. Okay, he said, his voice steadier now. Then let's start with something simple. The money. Martha's shoulders stiffened again. You said you knew about it, he continued. You said the transfers went through, but the bank told me it was withdrawn by someone else. So who? She looked at the door as if expecting it to open at any second. No one you can confront, she said. That's not how this works. It is if you want to walk out of here without making things worse. Daniel took a step closer. Worse? For who? For you. That answer hit harder than anything she'd said so far. He studied her face carefully. You really believe that, don't you? I know it. Silence settled again, heavier this time. Daniel looked down at the paper in his hand, then back at her. This name, he said. Lila Bennett. This is connected to the money, isn't it? Martha hesitated. That was enough. She is, he said quietly, or she was. Martha's lips parted, but she didn't correct him. Daniel's mind moved quickly now, connecting pieces that didn't quite fit yet, but were starting to form a shape. Is she the one who took it? No. Then who did? Martha shook her head. You're asking the wrong question. Then give me the right one. She looked at him, and for the first time since he had walked into that hallway, her expression softened just slightly. The right question, she said slowly, is why that money was ever there in the first place. Daniel frowned. What does that even mean? It means it wasn't yours to send. The words landed like a blow. He stared at her. Excuse me? Martha swallowed. Not in the way you think. I worked for that money. I know you did. Then what are you saying? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward the paper in his hand. That name didn't show up by accident. Nothing in this building happens by accident. Daniel looked down again, this time more carefully. His eyes moved over the typed lines, the dates, the references. It wasn't just a log, it was a record of controlled access, of things being moved quietly, hidden. Where did you get this, he asked. Martha hesitated again. It was left behind. By who? She shook her head. That's not something I can prove. But you believe it? Yes. Daniel felt his pulse pick up. Then someone wanted this found. Or someone made a mistake, she said. He looked up at her sharply. Which is it? I don't know. The answer felt real. That was the worst part. Daniel folded the paper slowly, then slipped it into his jacket pocket. Martha noticed immediately. You shouldn't keep that. I'm not leaving it here. You don't understand what that could mean. No, he said. I think I'm starting to. Her eyes narrowed slightly. And what do you think that is? I think someone's been using you, he said. And I think whatever this is, whatever she was involved in, it's still happening. Martha's face tightened. That's not something you can prove, she said. Not yet. The room felt smaller now, like the walls had moved closer while they were talking. Daniel took a breath, steadying himself. I'm not walking away from this, you should. I won't. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice again. Daniel, listen to me. There are people tied to this building, to that name. People who have spent years making sure nothing surfaces. Then they've been doing a bad job, he said, tapping his pocket lightly. That's exactly the problem. The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then from outside the door there was a sound, footsteps, slow, deliberate, getting closer. Martha's head snapped toward the door, her entire body went rigid in an instant. Go, she whispered. Daniel didn't move. Who is that? I said go. The handle on the door shifted slightly, not opening yet, just enough to let them know someone was there, listening. Martha grabbed his arm, her grip tighter than he had ever felt before. You don't want to be here when that door opens. Daniel's heart started to pound. He looked at her, then at the door. And for the first time he realized this wasn't just about a hidden document. Someone knew, and they were already too close. The handle stopped moving. For a moment, the silence on the other side of the door felt louder than any sound. Daniel didn't breathe, neither did Martha. Then, just as suddenly, the footsteps shifted. A pause, a faint scrape like someone adjusting their stance, and then they moved away, slowly, deliberately. Martha didn't let go of Daniel's arm until the sound was completely gone. Now you go, she whispered, her voice tight. Back the way you came. Don't stop, don't talk to anyone. Daniel didn't move. Who was that? I don't know, she said quickly. That's not true. It doesn't matter, she snapped, then caught herself. Her voice dropped again. It doesn't matter right now. He looked at her, searching for something, fear, guilt, anything that would make sense of what was happening. What happens if they see me? He asked. Martha's grip tightened for a second before she let go. Then you won't just be asking questions anymore. That doesn't answer anything, it answers enough. Daniel exhaled sharply, frustration building in his chest. But something in her face, something real, stopped him from pushing harder. For now, he nodded once. Fine, I'll leave. Relief flickered across her face, quick but unmistakable. But I'm not done, he added. The relief disappeared just as fast. I didn't think you would be, she said quietly. He pulled the door open just enough to check the hallway. Empty. Then he stepped out. The corridor felt different now. Not just dim and quiet, but watched. Every closed door felt like it could open. Every corner like someone could be standing just out of sight. He walked faster than he meant to. At the end of the hallway, he pushed through into the main building again. Bright lights, open space, people moving like nothing had happened, like none of this existed. Daniel kept walking until he reached the exit. Only when the cold air hit his face outside did he slow down. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, trying to steady himself. Then he felt it, the paper, still there. He pulled it out and unfolded it again, this time with more focus. The name at the top didn't feel distant anymore. It felt like a thread, and he was already holding onto it. Lila Bennett. He took out his phone and snapped a quick photo of the document, then folded it back and slipped it into his wallet instead of his pocket. Safer there. His fingers hovered over the screen for a moment, then he typed the name into the search bar. Nothing meaningful came up at first. A few outdated records. A real estate listing archive. A reference buried in a scanned document that didn't open properly. Then one result caught his eye. A property record, Westchester County. Same address listed on the paper. Status, inactive. Last activity, 31 years ago. Daniel stared at the date. 31 years. The same number that had been echoing in his head since Martha mentioned the past. He clicked into the record, but most of the details were locked behind restricted access. Ownership history redacted. Transfer logs incomplete. Someone had cleaned it, or someone had made sure it stayed that way. Daniel looked back at the building behind him. Whatever this was, it wasn't just about his mother, what a job she shouldn't have needed. This was something older, something buried. And someone had just tried to make sure he didn't see it. His phone buzzed in his hand. A call. Unknown number. Daniel hesitated for half a second, then answered. Hello. Silence, then a voice, male, calm and controlled. You shouldn't be looking into that name. Daniel's spine went rigid. Who is this? That doesn't matter. It matters to me. A brief pause. You were seen leaving a restricted area, the voice continued, ignoring the question. That was a mistake. Daniel glanced back at the building again, his pulse rising. I was visiting my mother. Another pause. We know who she is. Something cold settled in his chest. Then you know she shouldn't be working there, Daniel said. That's not your concern. It is now. Silence again, longer this time. When the voice returned, it was quieter. Walk away from this, Mr. Reed. Daniel froze. They knew his name. You've built a life, the voice went on. A good one. Don't let curiosity cost you that. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. Curiosity, he said. You think that's what this is? We think you don't understand what you're stepping into. Then explain it. We won't, then I'm not going anywhere. Another pause. Then softer now, almost like a warning rather than a threat. People who go looking for things tied to that address rarely find what they expect. The line went dead. Daniel lowered the phone slowly, his heart pounding harder now. Not fear. Not exactly. Something sharper. Focus. He looked down at the document again, then back at the building. They had called him within minutes, which meant someone inside had seen him. Which meant someone was watching his mother closely enough to notice. And which meant he wasn't the first person to ask questions. Daniel turned and walked toward his car. By the time he got in, his mind was already moving ahead. He needed more than a name, more than a partial record. He needed someone who could access what had been buried. Someone who knew how to read through legal walls instead of running into them. He started the engine, then pulled out his phone again, scrolled, stopped. There was a contact he hadn't used in years. Eleanor Grant, estate law, trust litigation. The kind of attorney people only called when something complicated refused to stay hidden. He hesitated for a second, then pressed call. It rang once, twice, then picked up. Grant and Associates, a woman's voice answered. Older, sharp, alert. This is Eleanor. Daniel didn't waste time. My name is Daniel Reed, he said. I need to ask you about a property in Westchester. An inactive estate tied to someone named Lila Bennett. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, but long enough. When Eleanor spoke again, her tone had changed. "You shouldn't be calling about that," she said. Daniel's pulse ticked higher. "That's the second time I've heard that today." "Yes," she said quietly, "and there's a reason for it." "Then tell me." Another pause, this one heavier. Then Eleanor spoke again. "Where did you get that name?" Daniel leaned back in his seat, staring out through the windshield. "I found something," he said. "Something hidden." Silence. Then, very carefully, "If you found what I think you found, then you're already involved in something that was never meant to resurface." Daniel tightened his grip on the phone. "Then I need to know what it is." Another long pause. Then Eleanor exhaled slowly. "If you want answers," she said, "you don't go back to that building." Daniel frowned. "Then where do I go?" Her answer came without hesitation. "You come see me." He straightened slightly. "When now?" she said. "Before anyone else decides to get there first." The line stayed open for a second longer. Then she added, quieter this time, "And Daniel, bring whatever you took with you. Because if I'm right about what it is," another pause, "that document was never supposed to leave that estate." Daniel ended the call and sat there for a second longer than he needed to. The engine was still running. The heater was blowing warm air across his hands, but none of it registered. All he could hear was Eleanor's voice echoing in his head. That document was never supposed to leave that estate. He reached into his wallet again, pulling the folded paper out. It didn't look like much, just a thin sheet, typed lines, a name, but now it felt heavier, dangerous even. He checked the time, then pulled out of the parking lot and onto the road. Westchester wasn't far, but the drive felt longer than it should have. Every car in his rearview mirror held his attention a little too long. Every stoplight felt like a delay he couldn't afford. Halfway there, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was Martha. He hesitated, then answered. "Are you safe?" she asked immediately. Daniel glanced at the road. "I'm fine. You left the building?" "Yes." A pause, then a quiet exhale on the other end. Relief, but not complete. "You shouldn't have taken that paper," she said. "I'm not giving it back. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I mean, things are already moving," she said, "faster than they should." Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Because of me?" "Yes." He let that sit for a moment. "Then maybe it was already going to happen." "No," she said quickly. "Not like this." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then maybe it should." Silence. "Martha," he said, softer now. "Whatever this is, you've been carrying it alone for too long. You don't know that. I know enough." Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Not defensive. Not sharp, tired. "There are things I didn't tell you," she said. "Not because I didn't trust you, but because I didn't want you to carry them. You don't get to make that decision for me anymore." "I know." That surprised him. She continued, her voice unsteady now. "I didn't think it would come back." Daniel slowed slightly as traffic built ahead of him. "What would come back?" She didn't answer directly. "That name you found," she said instead. "It wasn't just someone who worked there." "Then who was she?" Martha hesitated. "She was connected to the people who owned that estate," she said. "Closer than anyone ever admitted." Daniel frowned. "Family?" Another pause. "Yes." That single word shifted everything. Daniel felt it instantly. "Then why isn't she listed anywhere?" he asked. "Why is everything tied to her hidden?" "Because some families don't erase people by accident," Martha said quietly. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel again. "What happened to her?" "I don't know for certain, but you have an idea?" "Yes." "Then tell me." Martha exhaled slowly. "Not over the phone." Daniel glanced at the navigation. 5 minutes out. "I'm meeting someone," he said. "A lawyer, Eleanor Grant." The silence on the other end was immediate. "Then, you shouldn't involve her." Daniel frowned. "Why not? She's been part of this for years." "That's exactly why I need to talk to her." "You don't understand what side she's on." "Then help me understand." "I can't," Martha said again. Daniel closed his eyes briefly, frustration rising again. "You keep saying that, and you keep pushing anyway, because something's wrong," he said. "And I'm not going to pretend it isn't." The traffic cleared. He accelerated slightly. "Martha," he added quieter now, "did you know about this before today?" Another long silence. Then yes. The word hit harder than anything else. "For how long?" She didn't answer right away. "Since before you left," she said finally. Daniel felt something inside him drop. "You knew," he said. All this time you knew something was wrong and you didn't tell me? I didn't know everything, she said quickly. I only knew enough to stay quiet. That's not the same thing. It was the only thing I could do. Daniel shook his head, even though she couldn't see him. No, that was the safest thing for you, not for me. That's not fair. Neither is this, he shot back. The words hung between them. Then Martha spoke again, softer now. I did what I thought would keep you out of it, she said. I thought if I stayed where I was, if I didn't make noise, it would never come back to you. Daniel slowed the car as he turned onto High Street. But it did, he said. Yes, and now another pause. Now I don't know what they'll do, she admitted. Daniel pulled into a spot across from the building Eleanor had described. Old brick. 3 stories. No sign outside except a small plaque by the door. He cut the engine. Martha, he said, his voice steady again. I'm not walking away, I know. And I'm not letting you face this alone anymore. Another silence. Then quietly, I was afraid of that. Daniel stepped out of the car, phone still pressed to his ear. Afraid of what? That once you started asking questions, you wouldn't stop. He looked up at the building. Something about it felt different from the one he had just left. Less polished. More deliberate. Good, he said, because I'm just getting started. He hung up before she could respond. For a moment he stood there, the folded paper still in his hand. Then he walked across the street and pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and coffee. The reception area was small but organized, no wasted space. No decoration that didn't serve a purpose. A woman behind the desk looked up as he entered. Mid-50s, sharp eyes. Can I help you? I have an appointment, Daniel said. Daniel Reed. She studied him for a second, then picked up the phone. He's here, she said quietly. A pause. Then she nodded once and hung up. 3rd floor, she said. End of the hall. Daniel nodded and moved toward the stairs. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached the 3rd floor, he could feel it again, that same sense he'd had in the hallway earlier. That he wasn't just walking into a conversation. He was stepping into something that had been waiting. The door at the end of the hall was already open. Eleanor Grant stood just inside. She was older than he expected, but there was nothing slow about her. Her posture was straight, her gaze sharp, like she had already measured him before he even stepped inside. You brought it, she said. Not a question. Daniel nodded, pulling the paper from his wallet. Eleanor didn't take it right away. She just looked at it from a distance, her expression tightening slightly. Then she stepped back. Close the door, she said. He did. The click echoed louder than it should have. Eleanor moved behind her desk and finally reached for the document. She unfolded it carefully, her fingers steady. Her eyes moved across the page once, then again. When she looked up, something had changed, not surprise, recognition. You didn't just find a name, she said slowly. Daniel's pulse picked up. Then what did I find? Eleanor held the paper between them. You found the piece that was supposed to stay buried, she said. Daniel took a step closer. Buried by who? Eleanor met his gaze directly. By the same people who made sure your mother never had access to the money you sent her. Daniel felt his chest tighten. So you do know what happened to it? Yes, then tell me. Eleanor hesitated. For the first time since he had met her, she looked careful. Not about him, about the answer. Before I do, she said, you need to understand something. Daniel didn't move. This document, she continued, tapping the page lightly, was never meant to leave the Ashford estate. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. You said that already. I'm saying it again because you need to hear what it implies. And what's that? Eleanor leaned forward just slightly. It means someone either made a mistake, she said, her voice lowering, or someone inside that estate wanted you to find it. The room went still. Daniel felt it immediately. That shift. The difference between accident and intention. And if it wasn't a mistake? He asked. Eleanor held his gaze. Then the question isn't just who took your money, she said. A beat. It's who's trying to give it back. Daniel didn't respond right away. He just stood there, staring at Eleanor, letting her last sentence settle into something real. Not who took your money. Who's trying to give it back. That changed the shape of everything. Why would anyone do that? He asked finally. Eleanor leaned back slightly, folding her hands together on the desk. People don't give things back out of kindness in situations like this, she said. They do it because something has shifted. Power, risk, control. Daniel frowned. So you're saying someone's losing control? I'm saying someone might be trying to protect themselves, she corrected, and using you to do it. Daniel felt a sharp edge in that idea. I'm not being used. Eleanor gave him a look that wasn't dismissive, but wasn't convinced either. You walked into a sealed situation and pulled out a document tied to a name that hasn't appeared in any official record for over 3 decades. Then you were contacted within minutes by someone who knew exactly what you had. She paused. That's not coincidence. Daniel didn't argue. He couldn't. Tell me about Lila Bennett, he said instead. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She picked up the paper again, her eyes moving over the typed lines, then down to the handwritten note at the bottom. Do not release without confirmation, she read quietly. Then she looked back at him. That line shouldn't be there. Daniel leaned forward slightly. Why not? Because this isn't a document meant for circulation, she said. It's an internal control record. Something used to track access to restricted materials inside a private estate. It's not something you label like that unless what? Unless what's being tracked isn't just property, she said. Daniel's chest tightened. Then what is it? Eleanor met his gaze directly. Information, she said. Or identity, the word landed. Daniel's mind moved quickly again, piecing together fragments that didn't quite align yet. You said this came from the Ashford estate, she continued. Do you know anything about it? Only that it's been inactive for over 30 years, he said, and that my mother works in a building connected to it. Eleanor's expression shifted slightly. Connected how? Daniel hesitated, then answered. Cleaning contract. Commercial side. But the ownership traces back. That makes sense, she said quietly. How? Eleanor exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to say. The Ashford estate wasn't just a residence, she said. It was part of a larger family network. Properties, trusts, shell management structures. It was designed to hold assets quietly. Daniel frowned. Assets like money, yes. And people, he asked. Eleanor didn't answer right away. That was enough. Daniel felt it again, that cold, tightening feeling in his chest. What happened to Lila? He asked. Eleanor leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. Officially? Yes. She doesn't exist. Daniel blinked. That's not possible. It is if someone removes every legal trace of you, Eleanor said. No ownership records, no employment history tied to the estate, no listed beneficiaries. Nothing that would connect you to anything of value. Daniel shook his head. But this document proves she existed inside that system. Eleanor cut in, not outside of it. Silence filled the room. Daniel looked down at the paper again, seeing it differently now, not just as a clue, as evidence. Then why track her? He asked. If they wanted her erased, why keep records at all? Because you can't manage what you don't track, Eleanor said. Even things you intend to disappear. Daniel leaned back slightly, trying to process it. So she was what? Hidden? Controlled? Likely both. And then? Eleanor's eyes hardened just slightly. At some point, control fails, or becomes inconvenient. Daniel didn't need her to finish that thought. He swallowed. And my mother? Eleanor studied him carefully. Your mother worked within that system, she said. Maybe not directly, but close enough to see things she wasn't meant to see. She said Lila was family, Daniel said, connected to the owners. That would explain why she couldn't simply be removed without documentation, Eleanor replied. Family creates complications. Daniel let out a slow breath. So someone tracked her, restricted access, then erased her, yes, and now someone's trying to bring that back? Possibly. Why now? Eleanor shook her head slightly. That's the question we don't have an answer to yet. Daniel leaned forward again. You said something earlier about confirmation. What does that mean? Eleanor tapped the handwritten note again. This kind of instruction usually ties to a condition, she said. Something that has to be verified before the information can be released. Verified how? Identity, most likely. Daniel's pulse ticked up. You mean like proof someone is connected to her? Yes. He stared at her. Like a relative. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin folder. She opened it carefully, flipping through a few pages before stopping. This is what I still have access to, she said. Fragments. Not complete records. Daniel leaned closer. Inside the folder were copies. Old scans, partial documents, names redacted in black blocks, dates visible but context missing. Then one page caught his eye, a forms typed, with a header that looked like a medical intake record. What is that? He asked. Eleanor hesitated for just a second before answering. Hospital documentation, linked to the estate. Daniel's stomach tightened. Why would a hospital be involved? Because when you remove someone from official records, she said quietly, you have to control every place their identity might surface. Daniel felt the weight of that sink in. So this is proof, he said. Proof she existed. Partial proof, Eleanor corrected. Enough to raise questions, not enough to answer them. Daniel looked closer at the form. Most of it was redacted. But not everything. There was a date, April 1993, and below it a line that hadn't been fully blacked out. Dependent adult admitted under private authorization. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Dependent? He repeated. Eleanor nodded slowly. That term isn't used casually, she said. It means someone whose legal or financial autonomy is being controlled by another party. Daniel felt something shift again. That doesn't sound like someone who disappeared, he said. No, Eleanor agreed. It sounds like someone who was being managed. The word lingered. Managed. Daniel looked up at her. Managed by who? Eleanor held his gaze. That's where it gets complicated. Daniel leaned back slightly, his mind racing now. You said this was tied to confirmation, identity. Yes, and if that identity is confirmed. Eleanor closed the folder slowly. Then whatever was set aside for her or through her would have to be acknowledged, she said. Daniel's pulse spiked. Set aside, he asked. Eleanor met his eyes. A trust, she said. The word hit like a shockwave. Daniel felt it immediately, the money, the missing transfers, the controlled access. It wasn't random. It was connected. To her? He asked. Through her, Eleanor corrected. Daniel stood there, silent for a moment. Then you think I'm connected to this, he said. Eleanor didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at him in a way that felt different from before. Not just assessing, recognizing something. I think, she said slowly, that you didn't just find that document by accident. Daniel's chest tightened. And I think, she continued, that someone has been waiting a very long time for the right person to walk into that building and take it. The room went quiet again. Daniel's thoughts sharpened into something clearer now. Not answers, but direction. If this is about identity, he said, then there has to be a way to prove it. There is, Eleanor said. He didn't hesitate. Then we do it. Eleanor held his gaze for a long second, then she nodded once. I'll start the process, she said. But understand something. What? She leaned forward slightly. Once you do this, there's no stepping back. Not from them. Not from what this leads to. Daniel didn't look away. I already crossed that line. Eleanor studied him for a moment longer. Then she reached for the folder again, pulling out a second document, one she hadn't shown him yet. This one wasn't redacted. Not completely. At the top a name, Harrison Blake. Below it, a line that made Daniel's pulse stop for a fraction of a second. Primary trust authorization, beneficiary to be determined upon verified lineage. Daniel looked up sharply. Eleanor didn't speak. She didn't need to, because now, for the first time, the question wasn't just about the past. It was about who that beneficiary was supposed to be, and whether Daniel had just walked into the answer. Daniel didn't speak for several seconds. He just stared at the document in Eleanor's hand, the words burning into something deeper than confusion now. Primary trust authorization, beneficiary to be determined upon verified lineage. It wasn't vague. It was intentional. You're saying, he said slowly, that someone set this up knowing they didn't know who the beneficiary was. Yes, Eleanor replied, and they expected that person to be identified later. Yes. Daniel let out a quiet breath. That's not normal. No, Eleanor said, it's not. Silence settled between them again, but it felt different now. Not uncertain, not scattered, focused. Who created the trust? Daniel asked. Eleanor tapped the name at the top of the page. Harrison Blake. The estate owner? The last recognized one, she said. On paper, meaning. Eleanor leaned back slightly, meaning the Blake family structure is layered. Not everything is assigned to one name. But Harrison was the one who formalized this. Daniel processed that. So he knew something was coming. He knew something had already happened, Eleanor corrected. Daniel's jaw tightened. Something involving Lila. Yes, and instead of fixing it, he created a trust? Eleanor didn't react to the edge in his voice. He created a mechanism, she said. A way to resolve something later that couldn't be resolved at the time. That sounds like avoidance. It might have been, she said. Or it might have been the only option he believed he had. Daniel looked away for a second, running a hand across his face. So let me get this straight. There's a missing woman whose existence was erased. A trust set up in her name or through her. My mother working in a building tied to that estate. Money I sent disappearing into something connected to all of this. He looked back at Eleanor. And now you're telling me I might be tied to it? I'm telling you the possibility exists, she said. That's not the same as proof. No, she agreed. And proof is what matters. Daniel stepped closer to the desk. Then how do we get it? Eleanor didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened the folder again and pulled out another sheet. This is where things get more complicated, she said. Daniel leaned in. The document was different from the others. Not a log, not a hospital record. Something more structured, legal formatting, filing references. But parts of it were still missing. What am I looking at? He asked. A partial trust framework, Eleanor said. Not the full document, just enough to show how it was designed to operate. Daniel scanned it quickly. Legal language, conditional triggers, references to verification. Then one section stood out. Independent confirmation required through third-party validation. He looked up. What does that mean? It means no one inside the estate structure can approve the claim, Eleanor said. It has to be verified externally. By who? Someone not tied to the Blake family. Daniel nodded slowly. That's why you're involved. Eleanor didn't deny it. I was assigned as a neutral party years ago, she said. But the process was never completed, because no one came forward, because no one could be confirmed, she corrected. Daniel tapped the paper lightly, and now? Eleanor held his gaze. Now someone is pushing that process forward. Daniel felt the shift again, that same realization pressing harder. This isn't random, he said. Someone wants this to happen, yes, and they chose me. Or they identified you, Eleanor said. Daniel shook his head. Based on what? I didn't even know this existed until today. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That's not entirely true. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She leaned forward slightly. Your mother knew, she said. You told me that. Daniel's expression tightened, and she didn't tell me. No, Eleanor said. But that doesn't mean she wasn't part of the process. Daniel stiffened. No, she wasn't. I'm not saying she orchestrated it, Eleanor interrupted calmly. I'm saying she may have been placed in a position to ensure the right outcome. Daniel's voice dropped. You're saying she was being used. I'm saying she may have been protecting something, Eleanor said. Or someone. The room felt tighter again. Daniel took a step back, trying to steady his thoughts. If that's true, then she knew I could be connected. Yes. And she still kept me away from it. Yes. Daniel let out a slow breath, his chest tightening in a way that wasn't just anger. It was something else, something harder to name. Then she wasn't just protecting me, he said quietly. No, Eleanor agreed. She was protecting the outcome. Daniel looked up sharply. What outcome? Eleanor didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the folder again and pulled out a small photograph. Old, slightly faded, edges worn. She placed it on the desk between them. Daniel hesitated before picking it up. It showed a group of adults standing on what looked like the front steps of a large estate house. The quality wasn't great, but the details were clear enough. Formal clothing, stiff posture, a family photo. 3 people stood in the center, one older man, one younger man, and a woman. Daniel's breath caught slightly, not because he recognized her, but because something about her felt familiar, not obvious, not immediate, but enough to make him look closer. Who is this? He asked. Eleanor pointed to the woman. That, she said, is Lila Bennett. Daniel's grip on the photo tightened slightly. And the others? Harrison Blake, she said, pointing to the older man, and Victor Blake, his brother. Daniel's eyes flicked to the second man. Something about him felt off, not just in the photo, in the context. That's the same family that owns the estate now, he said. Yes, and they're still active, very. Daniel looked back at the photo, studying Lila's face again. There was something there, something he couldn't quite place, but it stayed with him. Why does this matter? He asked. Eleanor didn't hesitate. Because if you're connected to her, she said, then you're not just tied to a missing person. Daniel looked up. You're tied to that family. The words landed hard. And if that's true, she continued, her voice steady now, then the person currently controlling that trust has every reason to make sure you never prove it. Daniel felt the weight of that settle in. Who controls it? He asked. Eleanor met his gaze. Victor Blake. The name hung in the air. Daniel glanced back at the photo, then froze. Something clicked, something small, but sharp. He leaned closer, bringing the photo up again, his eyes narrowing. What? Eleanor asked. Daniel didn't answer right away. He turned the photo slightly. Focused, then pointed. This, he said quietly. Eleanor leaned in. What about it? Daniel's voice dropped. That watch. Eleanor followed his finger on Victor Blake's wrist, a distinctive design, old, but not outdated, recognizable. Daniel swallowed slowly. I've seen that before, he said. Eleanor's eyes shifted back to him. Where? Daniel looked up, his expression tightening. In that building, he said. A beat on the man who called me. Daniel's words hung in the room longer than they should have. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She studied him instead, measuring something beneath the surface of what he had just said. The man who called you, she repeated. Start from the beginning. Daniel exhaled slowly, forcing his thoughts into order. After I started asking questions at the building, he said, after I pushed the property manager about my mother's contract, I got a call. What kind of call? Private number. No caller ID. He knew my name, knew I was looking into things. Daniel's jaw tightened. He told me to stop. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. His exact words. Daniel thought back. The tone more than the words stayed with him, calm, controlled. Not a threat shouted in anger, but delivered like a fact. He said some things are settled for a reason, Daniel said, and that reopening them would hurt people who didn't deserve it. Eleanor didn't look surprised. He didn't raise his voice, Daniel added. Didn't need to. Like he already knew how this would play out. And you saw him. Later, Daniel said. Same building, executive floor. I wasn't supposed to be there. He paused, remembering. The watch stood out, not flashy, but precise, old money kind of thing. You don't forget it. Eleanor leaned back, her expression shifting into something more defined now. Less speculation, more confirmation. Victor Blake, she said quietly. Daniel felt it lock into place. So he's already watching this, Daniel said. Yes, and he knows I'm involved. Yes. Daniel let out a short breath, something between frustration and disbelief. Then why hasn't he shut it down already? Eleanor shook her head slightly. Because he can't. Not directly, Daniel frowned. That doesn't make sense. If he controls the trust, he controls access, she corrected. Not the structure itself. The trust was designed specifically to prevent that. Daniel stepped closer again. Then what can he do? Eleanor's voice lowered, delay, discredit, intimidate. Daniel gave a small, humorless laugh. He already started with that last one. Yes, she said. And if you continue, he will escalate. Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked back down at the photograph still in his hand. Victor Blake, younger but unmistakable, standing beside the man who created the trust. Beside Lila, a family, or something pretending to be one. He's not just protecting money, Daniel said. No, he's protecting the story. Eleanor nodded once, exactly. Silence returned again, but now it carried weight, direction. Daniel set the photo down carefully. What's the next step? He asked. Eleanor didn't hesitate this time. We establish eligibility, she said. Without that, nothing else matters. You mean prove whether I'm connected to Lila? Yes, Daniel crossed his arms. And how do we do that without tipping him off further? Eleanor gave a small, almost approving look. You're asking the right question now. She reached for another folder, thinner than the others, but sealed. This is the only part of the process that hasn't been triggered yet, she said, because it requires consent. From me, yes. Daniel studied the envelope. What's inside? A request for independent verification, Eleanor said. It initiates the chain. Once it's filed, the trust becomes active in a way that cannot be reversed quietly. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. Meaning? Meaning Victor will know immediately, she said. And once he knows, he won't stay in the background anymore. Daniel considered that. So this is the point where things stop being theoretical. Yes, and start becoming a fight. Eleanor held his gaze. They already are. Daniel looked down at the envelope again. For a moment, everything else faded, the office, the documents, the careful structure of it all. It came down to a choice. Stay in the gray area, where nothing was confirmed, but nothing could be taken from him. Or step forward, knowing it would bring everything into the open, including whatever his mother had been trying to keep buried. He reached out, then stopped. What if I'm wrong? He said quietly. Eleanor didn't soften her tone. Then the process ends, she said. And you walk away with answers even if they're not the ones you wanted. And if I'm right, Eleanor's voice was steady, then everything changes. Daniel nodded slowly. He picked up the envelope. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Before I sign anything, he said, there's something I need to do. Eleanor watched him. What? I need to talk to my mother again. Eleanor didn't argue. You should, she said. But understand this, once you begin this process, whatever she's been protecting, it won't stay protected. Daniel swallowed. I know. He turned toward the door, the envelope still in his hand. Daniel. Eleanor's voice followed him, calm but firm. Be careful how you ask her, she said. Because the truth you're looking for, she may have spent her entire life trying not to say out loud. Daniel nodded once, then he left. The drive back felt longer than before. Not because of distance, because of what waited at the end of it. The small house, the dim kitchen light, the quiet routines that suddenly felt fragile. When he stepped inside, everything looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. Martha was at the sink, her back to him, hands moving slowly under running water. Not cleaning now, just standing there. Like she had been waiting. You went somewhere, she said without turning. Daniel closed the door behind him. Yeah, a pause. Did you find what you were looking for? Daniel walked a few steps closer. I found more than I expected. She nodded slightly, still not facing him. That's usually how it goes. Daniel held the envelope tighter. There's a trust, he said. Set up decades ago. Her hands stilled under the water. He kept going. It's tied to someone named Lila Bennett. The name landed. He saw it in her shoulders first. The way they tensed almost imperceptibly. Then the silence. Daniel took another step forward. You knew that name, didn't you? Martha turned off the water slowly, still didn't turn around. Yes, she said. The word was quiet, but it changed everything. Daniel felt something in his chest tighten. Then why didn't you tell me? She didn't answer. Mom, his voice was sharper now. You let me think this was about money, about work, about nothing, while you knew there was something bigger behind all of it. Martha dried her hands carefully, too carefully. Then she turned. Her face wasn't defensive. It was tired, not from the day, from years. I didn't tell you, she said, because once you knew, there would be no way to stop what comes next. Daniel held her gaze. That's not your decision to make, I know, she said, but it was the only one I had. Daniel shook his head. That doesn't make sense. You've been living like this, working those jobs, hiding things, when there's something out there that could change everything. Martha's eyes didn't waver. That's exactly why I stayed quiet. Daniel frowned. Why? Her voice dropped. Because that something doesn't just change things for us, she said. It exposes what happened to her. The room went still. Daniel felt it again, that shift. That's what this is really about, isn't it? He said slowly. Not money, not inheritance. Martha didn't answer. Something happened to Lila, Daniel continued. Something the Blakes covered up. Martha's silence said enough. Daniel stepped closer, and you know what it was, a beat. Then she shook her head. Not everything, she said, but enough to know. Daniel pressed. Martha looked at him. And for the first time since he had come home, there was fear there, real fear. Enough to know, she said quietly, that if you keep going, she hesitated, like saying it might make it real. You won't just be uncovering the truth. Daniel's voice dropped. What else? Martha didn't look away. You'll be putting yourself in the same place she was, right before she disappeared. Daniel didn't wait. By the next morning, the verification request was signed, submitted, and logged through Eleanor's office. The moment the system registered it, everything shifted from quiet investigation to formal challenge, and Victor Blake responded exactly as Eleanor had warned. The notice came within 48 hours. A legal objection, immediate, aggressive, filed through his attorney, contesting Daniel's eligibility before the verification process could even complete. It argued insufficient evidence, questioned the legitimacy of the recovered documents, and most pointedly, claimed Daniel had obtained materials through unauthorized access. Daniel read it once, then again. He's not trying to win yet, Daniel said, handing the paper back to Eleanor. He's trying to stop the process from even starting. Eleanor nodded. That's his strongest move, she said. If the verification never completes, the trust never activates. Daniel leaned back in his chair, jaw tight. So we push through anyway. Yes, Eleanor said. But now we do it carefully. The next weeks were measured in documentation, not time. Records had to be requested through formal channels, medical files verified, employment ties established between Martha and the estate during the relevant years. Every piece had to be sourced independently, cross-checked and logged. Victor's team challenged everything, every signature, every date, every connection. But the structure Harrison Blake had set decades ago held. because it had been designed for exactly this. The final step came quietly. A third-party verification report, sealed and certified, delivered directly to Eleanor's office. She didn't open it right away. She called Daniel in first. He arrived within the hour. The room felt different this time, not tense, not uncertain, final. Eleanor placed the envelope on the desk between them. Once this is opened, she said, there's no more ambiguity. Daniel nodded once. Do it. She broke the seal, read, didn't speak for a moment, then she looked up. It's confirmed. Daniel didn't move. You are directly tied to Lila Bennett through documented lineage, she continued. The trust recognizes you as the qualifying beneficiary under its original terms. The words landed slower than expected. Not explosive, heavy, real. Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. So that's it? Eleanor shook her head slightly. That's eligibility, she said. Now comes execution. Victor didn't wait for that part either. He requested a formal hearing, not a courtroom, not public, but structured, controlled. A legal setting where the trust's validity and Daniel's claim would be challenged in full. Eleanor accepted. There's no avoiding it now, she told Daniel. I'm not trying to avoid it, he said. The room they met in was understated. Polished wood, neutral walls. The kind of place designed to look calm while decisions inside it carried weight. Victor Blake was already there when Daniel walked in. Older than in the photograph but unmistakable. The same posture, the same controlled stillness, and the same watch. Victor didn't stand, didn't greet him. He just looked at Daniel as if assessing something long anticipated. You should have left it alone, Victor said. Daniel didn't respond immediately. He took his seat across the table instead. You knew I wouldn't, he said. Victor's expression didn't change. Most people would have, he replied. Most people understand when something isn't meant for them. Daniel held his gaze. This was meant for someone. You just made sure no one could reach it. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. The attorney spoke first after that. Arguments laid out, objections raised, documentation reviewed line by line. Victor's side tried to dismantle the chain. They questioned Martha's connection to the estate, suggested gaps in the record, implied that Daniel's discovery had been manipulated to create a false claim. But every time they pushed, Eleanor answered. Not with emotion, with structure. Verified employment records placing Martha inside the estate system at the exact time Lila had been tracked. The maintenance log tying Lila's restricted status to internal control. The hospital document confirming Lila had been held as a dependent adult under private authorization. And finally, the third-party verification. Independent, clean, unconnected to anyone in the Blake structures. Victor's attorney tried to challenge it, but couldn't, because that had been Harrison's design. Daniel didn't speak much. He didn't need to. He just watched Victor, watched the moments where control slipped, small but visible, until finally there was nothing left to argue. The decision wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. The trust activated. Formally, irreversibly, control shifted. Victor sat back slightly, his fingers tightening just once on the edge of the table, then still again. You think this changes anything? He said quietly. Daniel met his eyes. It already has. Victor let out a slow breath. You have no idea what you've stepped into. Daniel didn't look away. I know enough. Victor studied him for a long second, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, not approval, acknowledgement. The meeting ended without ceremony, no raised voices, no final speeches, just signatures, and consequence outside the air felt different. Daniel stood there for a moment, letting it settle. Not the money, not the estate, the truth. He drove home slowly. When he walked in, Martha was sitting on the couch, hands folded in her lap like she had been waiting. He didn't speak right away. He crossed the room and sat beside her. It's done, he said. She nodded, her eyes searching his face. Then it's real now. Yes, a quiet moment passed. Then she said, I never wanted this to come back on you. Daniel looked at her. You didn't put it on me. I kept it from you. You carried it, he said. There's a difference. Her eyes filled slightly, but she didn't look away. They erased her, she said softly. And I couldn't stop it. I thought, if I stayed quiet, at least something would survive. Daniel nodded. It did. She shook her head faintly. Not without cost. He took a breath, then reached for her hand. You didn't fail her, he said. You made sure she wasn't forgotten. Martha closed her eyes for a moment. And for the first time since he had seen her on that bathroom floor, the tension in her shoulders eased. Not gone, but lighter. Daniel sat there with her, the weight of everything settling into something quieter, not resolution, but understanding. Later that night, he stood in the kitchen alone, looking at the envelope that had started it all. Still simple, still silent, but no longer hidden. Some truths didn't fix the past, they just made sure it couldn't be buried again, and sometimes that was enough. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to think about what you would have done in Daniel's place.